He never sought gratitude, never revealed to his son what transpired that evening with a stranger whose motorcycle and spirit were both shattered. Years later, however, when the bank threatened his home, an unforeseen event unfolded that no one could have anticipated. This chronicles the authentic account of a reserved man, an overlooked obligation, and a brotherhood that never abandons those who appeared when others turned away. Before we commence, I wish today delivers you solace, understanding, and something wonderful you hadn't anticipated. Please share in the comments where you're viewing from. Each comment, contribution, and membership supports us in delivering more meaningful stories to your lives. Thank you. The bank representative's words reverberated like a mallet striking weathered timber. We issued 6 warnings, Mr. Ridley. This is your final notice. Owen Ridley positioned himself within the bare doorframe of his porch, arms folded across a weathered flannel shirt, gazing beyond the withering cornfield. His residence wasn't merely his sleeping quarters. It was where his wife had passed away, clasping his hand, and where his son had taken his initial steps across the kitchen floor. Now, following 20 years of struggling to preserve it, the property was sliding away from under his feet, yet he offered no entreaties. Owen was a man of sparse words and even fewer obligations. That morning, he gathered his lunch container and proceeded down the gravel pathway to his position at Dale's Auto. As with every previous day, he carried grease beneath his fingernails and maintained dignity in his gait. No townsperson understood how near he was to losing everything, but someone had been observing. 20 miles distant on Route 7, a sound thundered. Engines. Not one, not two, but dozens. Chrome, leather, scars, and quietude, and they were returning for something they had never forgotten. Not currency. A debt that resided within the heart. 15 years prior, Owen Ridley had been securing Dale's auto shop when he observed a man resting against a damaged Harley just beyond the lot. The man appeared threatening. Long beard, worn vest, split knuckles, and recent wounds. However, he wasn't intoxicated. He wasn't boisterous, simply exhausted, bleeding from his ribs and breathing laboriously. Owen posed no questions. He nodded and motioned toward the garage. Wheel bearings destroyed? Owen inquired, already accessing his toolbox. The motorcyclist nodded, wary. He presented himself as Tuck, simply Tuck. Didn't mention his riding companions. Owen didn't inquire. He labored through the night repairing the Harley's front assembly. When Tuck produced a crumpled bundle of cash, Owen dismissed it. Keep enough for fuel and a meal. Travel safely, brother. Tuck offered no thanks, no smile, just stared briefly, then departed into the mist before sunrise. Owen never spoke of it. Just another quiet evening in a life filled with small kindnesses. That small kindness embedded itself in Tuck's soul like a spike in boot leather. What Owen remained unaware of was that Tuck had been fleeing from death, and no one had ever offered him anything without demanding blood in exchange. Owen's son Jesse was 16 now. He operated the register at the neighborhood gas station, contributed his share at home, and still addressed his father as Sir. He harbored dreams of joining the forestry department, perhaps attending college, but Owen hadn't revealed the reality to him. They were 4 weeks from foreclosure. He had sold his vintage shotgun, skipped meals, and accepted side work repairing engines in barns to meet the payments. They rarely discussed Owen's wife. Her photograph remained on the mantel. Flannel shirt, crooked smile, eyes that perceived everything. Jesse only knew she had died young from cancer. Perhaps Owen never provided the details. Some sorrows aren't shared. They're simply carried like firewood, silent, fractured, heavy. That morning, Jesse discovered the envelope in the mailbox. He presented it to his father. Final notice. Owen didn't flinch. But far down the road, a single headlight illuminated in a parking lot behind the diner. Then another. Then 10. Leather gloves tightened, chains clinked. They had ridden 1,000 miles in silence, awaiting this particular day because someone had whispered in an Arkansas bar, "That man saved one of ours." Tuck had never been the emotional type. 3 months earlier, he had buried his final brother in a pine coffin beneath Texas soil. The original crew was gone, cancer, bullets, accidents. The road had grown thin. The chrome was corroding. Then the letter arrived. A foreclosure notice delivered through a mutual contact, mistakenly mailed to a Kansas post office box that hadn't been utilized in a decade. Tuck opened it with grease-stained fingers, and the name struck him like a freight train: Owen Ridley. He hadn't forgotten the man, the quiet mechanic who rescued his motorcycle, possibly even his life, when no one else showed concern. Tuck had never repaid the favor, and that troubled him, not with all the wrongs he had committed. So he placed a call, just one. No explanations, no appeal, merely a gravelly voice stating, "Owen's in trouble." The following week, riders began appearing at chop shops and truck stops throughout the Midwest. Men with old debts, men who remembered. Now they were riding again, not for revenge or tribute, but for a man who never requested anything and gave more than he realized. Owen completed his shift late that Thursday. Dale offered him overtime. He politely refused. Need to get home before Jesse consumes all the leftovers. The sun was setting behind the water tower, painting the sky with strokes of orange and rust. As Owen turned onto his dirt road, he noticed dust clouds rising over the horizon. Initially, he thought it was a storm, but the thunder wasn't overhead. It was on the ground. Tires, dozens of them. He stopped cold when the first motorcycle rounded the bend. Then another, then 10, then more. All of them rolling slowly, respectfully. Engines purring like reverent hymns. Hell's Angels patches, battle-worn leathers, faces full of road and sorrow. Tuck pulled up first and shut off the engine. His eyes met Owen's. No words yet, just a long, heavy look. Then Tuck dismounted, removed his gloves, and handed Owen a sealed envelope. Owen stared, confused. Tuck simply said, "We remember." Inside was a check. Not charity, not pity. The exact amount to settle the house. But behind that check was something weightier. A debt repaid by brotherhood. And it was only the beginning. Jesse stood on the porch, holding the screen door open, watching the bikers arrive like a procession of spirits. His young eyes widened as more riders appeared, each one different, but carrying the same quiet reverence. Some had beards turned silver, some wore patches faded with time. None of them laughed. None of them created a spectacle. This wasn't noise, it was ceremony. Owen examined the check again. The numbers matched the mortgage balance to the final cent. He shook his head. "I didn't request this." Tuck's voice was steady. "You didn't need to. We remember what matters." Inside, Jesse whispered, "Dad, who are they?" Owen paused for a long while. Men who've been through fire and never forgot who pulled them out. That night, Owen didn't sleep. The check sat untouched on the kitchen table beside his wife's photograph. He wasn't a man who accepted handouts, but this wasn't that. It was something sacred, a reckoning of kindness. The next morning, every single biker was still there, camped around the property in silence, like they were protecting something holy or bidding farewell to someone who never asked to be remembered. Owen brewed coffee at dawn and poured a cup for each man still standing. He didn't speak much. They didn't either, but sometimes silence carries more weight than words. Tuck sat on the porch steps with Jesse, teaching him how to roll a cigarette with a leaf and a paper scrap. "We used to do this when we didn't have much," he said. "Back then, a warm fire and dry socks meant everything." Jesse grinned. "My dad says the same thing." Tuck nodded slowly. "He's one of the last good ones." Inside the house, Owen stared out the window. He remembered a time when no one came. When his wife was in the hospital and he had to work double shifts to keep the lights on. He never complained, just bore it like a man taught not to cry in public. But now, strangers, no, brothers, had come without being asked. By noon, neighbors began arriving. Cars stopped along the road, phones out, people confused. 100 bikers on a quiet stretch of farmland. But none of them saw what was really happening. This wasn't a spectacle. It was a man being repaid for a moment he'd long forgotten. The local sheriff, Tom Raleigh, pulled into the driveway in his squad car. His boots struck the gravel like they owned the place. He eyed the patchwork of bikes and men with thinly veiled suspicion. "You planning a rally, Tuck?" he asked. Tuck didn't flinch. "No, sir, just honoring a man." Raleigh glanced at Owen. "You okay with this?" Owen nodded slowly. "They're not here to start trouble. They're here to finish something good." Still, the sheriff didn't like it. He saw headlines in his head. "Keep it quiet. No fires, no flags." Tuck gave him a look. "We didn't come for banners." As the sheriff departed, a younger rider named Stitch approached Owen with a folded piece of leather. Inside it was a patch, not club colors, but a symbol. A single wrench and flame stitched over denim. "You earned this," Stitch said. "It's not official, but it's ours. We call it the Mechanic's Creed." Owen took it, unsure what to say. Stitch added, "Most of us wouldn't be alive if you hadn't kept Tuck on the road that night. We were in a war none of us knew how to survive. You gave us a fighting chance." That evening, flames danced in the fire pit positioned near the field's edge. There was no alcohol, no raucous music, only the whisper of burning pine and the deep murmur of shared stories. Men who had remained silent for years rediscovered their voices beneath Owen's shelter. Tuck revealed what he had never shared before. "When I arrived that night, blood flowed from wounds earned in a blade encounter. My club was lost, my brotherhood gone, everything had vanished. I stood ready to surrender completely. Yet this man," he gestured toward Owen, "repaired my motorcycle without passing judgment, provided me with food, supplied fuel, and met my gaze as though I retained my worth." Owen remained silent, his attention fixed on the dancing flames. Goose, another rider, contributed his thoughts. "We believed brotherhood meant charging into damnation together, but sometimes it's defined by actions taken in solitude." Jesse pressed closer to his father's side. "You never shared this with me," Owen whispered in response. "Certain truths require no telling. They simply need preservation in memory." Beneath the star-scattered heavens, something fundamental transformed. This moment transcended farewell or gratitude. It represented a homecoming, the kind that materializes only when men carry loyalty, not in their possessions, but embedded in their very essence. By dawn's arrival, they had vanished. No farewells were exchanged, no parting messages left behind, only tire impressions in the earth, and a check resting undisturbed on the kitchen surface. Owen cradled the leather patch in his palm. The stitching appeared crude yet durable. It felt deserved, like an honor no one had requested. Jesse lifted it, examined it closely, then returned it to his father's hands. "Will you deposit it?" he inquired. Owen folded the check with deliberate care. "Yes," he replied, "not because I require rescue, but because someone still maintains faith in advancing kindness." They departed for town as companions. Owen drove his weathered truck while Jesse occupied the passenger seat. Heads extended through windows like eager dogs savoring the wind. Upon entering the bank, the teller's expression registered shock. "You're settling everything in full?" Owen confirmed with a nod. "On behalf of 100 men, all who forgot how to request assistance, yet none forgot how to express appreciation." Outside, the breeze intensified. Owen gazed westward where the motorcycles had disappeared down the highway. Their destination remained unknown to him, but one certainty persisted. Brotherhood wasn't determined by who accompanied your journey. It was defined by who appeared when others abandoned you. Owen spoke little regarding that week. When townspeople inquired about the riders, he simply smiled. "Old companions," he would respond, and that sufficed. Yet something shifted in the aftermath. Quietly, people who had previously overlooked him now paused to offer handshakes at the feed store. The pastor delivered additional firewood. Even Sheriff Tom Raleigh acknowledged him with something approaching respect. Owen required no applause. He possessed shelter overhead, his son remained by his side, and a tranquility he hadn't experienced in years settled upon him. Most evenings found him on the porch savoring black coffee, the worn leather patch beside him like an artifact from a previous existence. Then one Sunday, correspondence arrived. No sender's address appeared, just a single handwritten page. "Brother Owen, the next time a man limps into your workshop, don't merely repair the motorcycle, inquire what fractured within his spirit." That night, You provided more than mechanical parts. You returned my will to continue forward. Should you ever stumble, we will support you. The signature bore a single name, Tuck. Owen folded the letter and positioned it beneath his wife's photograph. Certain debts aren't intended for repayment, only remembrance. Winter arrived with fierce intensity that year. Wind screamed across the plains like an injured creature, and the pipes froze repeatedly. Yet Owen and Jesse confronted it, united. They accumulated firewood, insulated the windows, shared hearty soups, and conversed more than usual. Jesse now harbored questions about men, about trust, about silence. "Were you frightened during those times?" he asked one night beside the fire. Owen nodded. "Most of the time. But fear isn't the adversary, son. Losing sight of your identity, that destroys a man." Jesse observed the patch on the mantelpiece. "Did you ever desire to ride alongside them?" Owen smiled faintly. "I already had, just didn't require the motorcycle." Later that week, Owen discovered a used motorbike online. Nothing ostentatious, simply solid construction with good foundations. He purchased it, restored it in the barn, and presented Jesse with the keys. "Not for escape," Owen clarified, "but for riding toward purpose." Jesse gripped the handlebars. "Are you certain?" Owen nodded. "One rule only. Ride as though someone might need you down the road." Jesse comprehended perfectly. Sometimes a man teaches by riding alongside you. Other times he teaches through stillness. The town never learned the complete story. Speculation circulated that Owen had been a secret member, that he had preserved a biker leader's life, that he operated a garage for outlaws. None held truth. The truth proved simpler. One night years prior, a man collapsed emotionally before Owen. Without question or condition, Owen helped restore him to his path. No vows, no expectations, simply decency. The world produces few Owens anymore. Men who act righteously when unobserved, who don't broadcast their deeds or document them for recognition. That's why the men on those motorcycles rode for him, not because he was loud, but because he was quiet, solid. The kind of man you remember when life falters and you believe no one notices your struggles anymore. At the annual town festival, Owen sat beside Jesse watching the fireworks display. Nearby teenagers discussed viral fame. One asked, "What would people remember you for?" Jesse looked toward his father, firelight reflected in his eyes, and whispered, "For keeping men on the road who didn't realize they could still ride." The following spring, Jesse rode his motorcycle to the county border where the two-lane highway met the horizon. He stopped at a rest area and waited. Owen had identified this as the location. At precisely noon, the wind strengthened. Then came the rumble. A dozen bikes crested the hill, sunlight gleaming off chrome, long shadows trailing behind. Tuck led the formation, slower now, leaner, but still commanding presence like thunder in human form. He pulled alongside Jesse, cut the engine, and removed his helmet. "You must be the boy." Jesse nodded. "I'm the man now." Tuck studied him momentarily. "You ride clean, I ride true." That earned a smile. Tuck reached into his saddlebag and handed Jesse a sealed container. "Deliver that to your father. It's not money, just something we all contributed." Jesse accepted it carefully. "Why now?" Tuck's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "Because we lost one of ours last month." He wanted Owen to have his old belt buckle, said it brought him luck. Jesse paused. "Why would that matter?" Tuck looked directly into his eyes. "Because when you help a man live longer than he planned, you become part of his legacy." Back home, Owen opened the container slowly. Inside, wrapped in soft fabric, lay a worn leather belt buckle. The engraving had faded, but the words remained visible when tilted toward light. "Live loud, die surprised." More surprisingly, a folded photograph was included. It was aged, sun-bleached, edges curled. It displayed a younger Tuck standing with 5 other bikers, all gathered around a Harley. There, in the corner, half-shadowed, stood Owen, wrench in hand, smiling faintly. He didn't recall the photograph being taken, but clearly someone had preserved it. He traced the edges with his thumb, remembering that night, how quiet it had been, how broken Tuck had appeared, how insignificant it had all seemed at the time. Yet this image had survived wars. countless miles, and heartbreak. Someone had carried it in a vest pocket for over a decade. Jesse observed him from the doorway. "Are you well, Dad?" Owen nodded. "I'm more than well, son. I'm remembered." That was something money couldn't purchase. Something louder than engines and far weightier than silence. Months passed. Owen heard nothing more from the riders. No letters, no calls. Just wind, corn, and the sound of Jesse tuning his new bike beneath the old maple tree. Life returned to its gentle rhythm. Yet it was different now. Not because of what Owen gained, but because of what he finally allowed himself to receive. One afternoon, Dale from the garage visited with beer and a story. "Had someone come in last week," Dale said, opening a can. "Asked if Owen Ridley still worked here. I told him you were semi-retired. He left this card." Owen examined the card. No name, just a symbol. The same wrench and flame that had been stitched into the patch. He nodded once. Later that night, Jesse found his father kneeling by the mantel, lighting a small candle beneath his wife's photograph. The card was tucked into the frame beside it. Jesse sat beside him quietly. "Did you miss that life?" he asked. Owen shook his head slowly. "I never had that life. I just had one moment, and I gave it fully. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the course of men forever." That summer, Jesse was accepted into the state forestry program. On his departure morning, he wheeled the bike to the porch where his father stood waiting. Owen handed him a small canvas pouch containing tools, bandages, and a folded note. Jesse opened it later at a highway rest stop. The note read, "If someone's stranded, stop. If someone's quiet, ask. If someone's hurting, help. Ride true. Ride home." Simple, solid, just like his dad. He wiped away a tear and revved the bike, contemplating the road ahead. He didn't know where it would lead him, perhaps into mountains, perhaps into wildfires, perhaps into someone else's breakdown, but he would ride with the same creed that saved his father. Meanwhile, Owen returned to repairing engines for neighbors, restoring old tractors, and savoring slow coffee on the porch. He required no recognition. The men who mattered had already witnessed him. He kept the buckle on the shelf next to the photograph, the card, and the patch. It wasn't a trophy, it was a reminder. One act of quiet decency could ride across generations and never run out of road. In the fall, word spread through town that an unfamiliar bike had arrived at the church parking lot. A large man, weathered and silent, entered during service and occupied the back pew. Folks whispered, was he in trouble? Was he lost? After the service, he approached Owen outside. "Name's Red. I rode with Tuck in the old days." Owen nodded, extending his hand. "Glad you came." Red retrieved something. From his saddlebag, a small wooden box, handmade. The lid was etched with the same wrench and flame. "Tuck passed. He wanted you to have this." Owen opened the box at home. Inside lay Tuck's dog tag, a folded bandana, and a single note. "You were the first to look at me like I wasn't broken." Owen sat motionless for a long while. He didn't weep. He didn't move. He simply closed the box, ran his hand across the lid, and whispered something to the empty kitchen. "Ride home, brother." Some men depart with noise. Others leave with a silence so profound it echoes across every road they ever traveled, and the ones they never had the chance to. The day the mortgage burned was the day the town changed forever. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't revenge. It was Owen. He lit the paper himself in a fire pit behind the barn just before winter, not from anger, but from peace. Jesse had returned to visit that weekend. He watched the edges curl and vanish into smoke, his father beside him in that same flannel shirt he always wore for meaningful occasions. "I held on to that debt like it defined me," Owen said quietly. "But it never did." Jesse asked, "Why burn it?" "Because I want to make room for the things that actually matter now." Above them, a hawk circled. The fields were dry and golden. The wind carried the ashes toward the gravel road where the riders once came. Jesse looked over. "Do you think they'll ever return?" Owen shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't change what was real." In that moment, Jesse saw not just a father, but a man who had outlived his debts, outlived his sorrow, and allowed gratitude to take root where pain used to live. That's how legends are born. Not from the noise they make, but from what they choose to leave behind. Years from now, people will still discuss it. About the day the riders came, about the man who paid without question, about the mortgage settled in full, not by a banker, not by a miracle, but by men with engines for hearts and bruises for memories. But Owen didn't live for stories. He lived for mornings with black coffee and late evenings with quiet skies. He lived for machines he could repair and people he couldn't but helped anyway. He lived for the creak of his porch swing and the sudden laughter of Jessie calling home. On the day he passed, the roads were silent. But at dusk, riders came again. Not hundreds, just a dozen. Enough. They parked in a perfect row outside the barn, said nothing, just stood at attention. One stepped forward, placed the belt buckle on the steps, then turned and rode off. No eulogy, no ceremony, just respect. And on that old leather patch above the mantle, now faded, was stitched a new word by Jessie's hand: repaid. Because when a man pays kindness forward without need for return, the road finds a way to circle back every tides. Some debts aren't measured in dollars, they're measured in dignity. If the story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss the next ride into real stories that matter. What would you do if a stranger saved your life without ever asking your name? Let us know in the comments below. We'll see you on the road.